Evo is coming up this weekend with a new character reveal. So before we get to that, I thought it'd be fun to go through the Nolt board one last time since ABSA is still new and I haven't done one in a minute. There's tons of dev responses, so I'm going to get to a few of those and a few of the most upvoted comments. To start with an unfortunate opener, we have Release the Surveys. This poster says, I think a lot of people would be curious to see some of the results of the surveys that we all took. If you don't remember, that was like maybe a few months ago and it asked you like, who's your favorite rival to fight? What feature do you want to see come to the game? Things like that. Dan said, we reviewed the surveys and had our producer create a presentation with the information that we learned and reviewed with our whole team in a call. The survey results are helping us realign our development priorities and confirm or deconfirm some of our suspicions. But we don't have plans on releasing the results at this time, since that was never the intention when we first wrote it up. I think if we wanted to release the results, we would have worded the questions a little differently. I do think that we could do more surveys in the future, and maybe design those with the intention to release the information after they are completed. I'm a little bit bummed to hear this, but I also do agree, right? Let's say if they released a survey in full, and then it showed, like, most people hate to fight Claren, right? That could definitely bum out Claren mains, you know? Like, I don't think very many people like to fight her from what I've seen, right? I don't mind her. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like you could kind of get some problems within the community. However, I could imagine some of the questions could be fun to like see the answers to, like, what kind of features do you want in the game, you know? Things like that would be kind of interesting to see, but I understand why they are. To pivot to some good news, however, this player says Crab. Give Crag a crustacean skin, please, and he links like Mr. Krabs, and Dan said, I'll consider this. I think that's really fun. And there was also a Dreams of Ether ABSA skin that someone requested, and they said, I'm a huge fan of ABSA, but an even bigger fan of Dreams of Ether. The rhythm game at the end has great skin potential, and I'd be happy to have it in the game. If this ever gets a skin, please also make her chibi. I know this definitely won't happen, but it'd be so cool to have her confetti lightning too. Dan said it would be a pretty good skin to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of Dreams of Ether release, and he puts a little thinking emoji, which kind of gives me a thought that this is probably coming, right? But I'm very happy about that. I think Dreams of Ether was super awesome. If you haven't played it, go check it out. It's like $2 or $3, and it's a whale of a time. Keeping on our theme before we pivot to a few more serious, balance-based questions, this asker says, Rivals of Aether 1 Parry sounds for the pixelated skins. I really love the Rivals of Aether 1 Parry sounds, and it would be cool for the backer or Rivals 3D skins to have it. Dan actually changed this to planned, which is sick to see. He said, we got some updates for the low poly and retro skins planned, and this was on the list. But we'll have some time before we get to updating them. I do wonder if Rivals 3D will get like a rerun. I feel like that event was pretty popular, right? I think everyone liked the low poly skins. So I imagine they could like rerun it and they could do like 4 different characters, right? And whenever that does get rerun, I'd imagine we would see the new audio effects. And I think in the past they even mentioned like playing around with like compressing the voices to make them sound like lower quality like an N64 game. I don't know, I feel like adding details like that, right? Like the retro Parry sounds, and then you also have like the N64 voice mod, that would be kind of sick, you know? For our first balance request, we have the gravity jump adjustment. The way gravity jump was implemented feels really good. I like that it's easier in the air, but now it's much harder to do from plat drop. Is this intentional? Could the plat drop grav jump be adjusted to make the timing consistent with the aerial version? SBS responds and says, platforms in this game have 3 frames of plat drop, which messes with the timing a bit. We've made it much easier to do in the air, but the platforms are a bit trickier. It currently is the game, but we're looking at a few options. We're concerned that the platform differential could lend to a lot of accidental gravity jumps, but it might be best to test options in our closed beta soon. So this does mean this will probably be getting some kind of change in the future. It might be in a month or so, because I know they normally do like to take their time and make sure like quality of life changes like this are quality, which is good. You don't want something being pushed to live and it's kind of messy. But this should be coming to the game eventually. On the topic of ABSA's double jump and things like that, this post says, ABSA's tap jump, double jump cancel aerials cannot carry momentum. Hello, currently tap jump, double jump aerials cannot carry the double jump momentum, even when up, the jump input is held. This works in Rivals 1, and I was wondering if it was intentional. It's not the hugest deal, even if it has its benefits sometimes, but it seems unintentional or unintuitive. And SBS says that sounds like just a tap jump issue, as the button hold works. I've sent this to our programmers to take a look into. So this should be getting fixed pretty soon. It'll let you do your rising aerials with the double jump cancel, and just get a little bit more movement out of them, which will be super awesome. Also, on the topic of ABSA, let's talk about this post really quickly. They say, let ABSA gravity cancel more than once per airtime. They say, I don't know if this would be broken or what, but it could maybe be cool. I don't know, peace and love. I think that the problem with this, and I think they're just saying like it could be cool, not like a super serious balance change. But if you let ABSA have the gravity cancel, right, where she goes straight down, that would be better than like her like normal fall speed. So let's say if you're juggling ABSA and then she just plummeted to the floor, right? That would be pretty difficult to combo her in that state. Our dev response says, it used to be like that, but it enabled ABSA to fall off the stage for up to 15 seconds at a time by alternating gravity jump and cloud hop plus pop. It wasn't necessarily broken, but it was very uninteractive and not fun for either player. As such, we currently have no plans to give her more gravity jumps per airtime. So this makes a lot of sense as well. ABSA can definitely stall for a pretty long time off stage. If you go off stage right now and you just do like a cloud press, a pop, and then a double jump, then you can do a cloud and another pop. You kind of stay at the same height and you can just kind of like float out there, which definitely seems a little bit uninteractive, which is good to avoid. Another topic that I thought was kind of interesting that's not related to ABSA specifically, this poster says, sound design for newer characters is great, but the older ones lag behind. First, let me preface this by saying, I absolutely love how ABSA and her last few characters sound. They're all top tier and I don't have any complaints to make. And that is exactly why I'm listening to the sounds of the first characters that are Raster and Rano feel so stale in comparison. I think they really need a rework. These aren't bad, but they don't really hit like the new ones. It feels like their sounds are drier and their hits are kinda off. Like how Zetter sounds like you're getting hit by anything but a claw and a bit too loud, or how Ranu moves build up and sound loud and obnoxious at the same time. I really appreciate all the work the dev team has been doing for the game, and I can see it evolving with every new patch and every new character. And I know that it's hard, but I really hope one day the team has time to go over old characters and give them the love to be in line with newer ones. Mint, who's actually been on the channel before, said, hey, thank you so much for the positive feedback. With every new character, we feel like we're able to establish Rivals 2's sound design more and more, and it's a pretty rewarding experience overall. That is to say, in a lot of ways, I sympathize with the overall feeling you're describing here. The first characters were made years ago, when not a lot of what we're doing today was established and we had different visions of what the game's audio was going to be. In an ideal world, every time we feel like a direction has changed in a substantial way, we would go back to the older characters and update them to match. But this takes way more time and manpower than a live service development cycle allows us to. Especially since, like you said, they're not bad, they're just made differently from what we would do today if we had to remake them. There are plans to fill in some spots on Zetterburn and Rano that are missing important sound effects over time, but no plans for a full rework in the foreseeable future. This feeling might change over time for a good, full rework, as it would take much more work to make a new character. In the current pace of releasing 4 characters per year, it's hard to do that. So basically what this is saying is, they do definitely want to go and touch up the older characters some, but a full rework to their audio wouldn't really be possible with the current workload that they have with every character launching every 3 months or so, right? So I do wonder if we'll see more of these reworks as the game's like release cadence slows down a little bit. But I also like personally don't think the older characters sound bad necessarily. I do agree that maybe there could be a new sound, let's say if Zetterburn Forward Air had a claw sound, right? Or like Zetterburn Jab 3 has like a like bite sound, right? Maybe if more moves had a sound like that, they give them like an iconic like touch to them, right? Whenever you use this move, you get this audio cue, right? That would be pretty interesting. But it's definitely not something that is super needed right now as like an emergency fix. You know, there's more things that are needed more, like let's say the next character, you know? On the topic of like audio and things like that, this poster says, add something more to Pool Party Forsburn. It's a cool skin, but I feel like it's missing some elements that most epic skins have. I think it would be cool to either give the skin some unique voice lines, a victory jingle, or even just give the dagger it hits an ice sound effect like Edalis. Just something to make it seem less like a rare skin, lol. And then over here, Mind, the same dude from last time, says, Pool Party Forsburn's custom victory music wasn't playing properly, and will be addressed in a hotfix soon. So this should be all fixed up pretty soon, if it's not already. I don't have this skin. I think it's really cool, but I'm saving my Ether bucks for the Evangelion skins they teased. I don't think they're like officially Evangelion, but they're like mecha skins, which I think will be sick for next month. Pivoting over to tutorials, because I know a few people have been asking about those, let's start with, so where's the Edalis 101 video? Hi, before I address this, I want to thank the team for all the things you've actually done for Edalis after his awful release. He went from being one of the worst characters I've ever played in any platform fighter in terms of balance to a very satisfying and fun one to pilot. However, there are still things that bug me about the attention he receives in the game. I'd address his lack of cosmetics, 5 months without a new skin now by the way, but this was mainly about the 101 video. How come he's the only character without any one by now? I remember asking this and I was told there were issues and that's why it got delayed, but I asked this back in April. My question is, what's the holdup? Is it possible to know what happened exactly, or maybe we'll get it like an estimate? That's all, thank you. And SBS responds and says, "Hey there, we've ran into several roadblocks with the 101 video. We're told it's almost complete, so it should be up soon, but there's some dots here which kind of scare me a bit. We will make sure of it." For Absol 101, we ended up doing everything except the VO in-house to make sure it was out on her launch. This gives me the idea that maybe the Ether Studios team got someone to make the video for them and they just didn't deliver. And so it just wasn't on Ether Studios' schedule and then someone else was working on it. And something probably fell through behind the scenes and it just hasn't been able to make it to release. Next up, this poster says, "Please prioritize tutorials." Please prioritize the intermediate and advanced in-game tutorials. The playable beginner tutorials were added in patch 1.1.0 on January 21st, 90 days after the game's release. The intermediate and advanced tutorials have been coming soon for 161 days and counting. That's a total of 251 days that the game hasn't had the tutorials to explain fundamental mechanics and concepts like recovering, hit falling, floor hugging, CC, all that. The new player experience is playing single player, queuing for ranks, getting beat, and then queuing for casual because it sounds safe, and then getting beaten casual. Then they realize that there's no real tutorials, and they're writing a negative review on Steam or Reddit post. How many of the negative reviews come from players who quit the game because of floor hugging or were actually complaining about crouch canceling? Because players didn't know that either mechanic worked, and how do you differentiate the two? I'm not suggesting that new players are helpless, little woodland creatures who need to be protected from the big, bad gold players skinning them alive in their placement matches. I'm not even suggesting playable tutorials. All I'm saying is that new players need resources to learn and play the game. It's been 251 days without them. I held off on this post for the past 3 patches, blindly believing that tutorials were coming. A quick secret, intermediate tutorials are actually out. They weren't out at the time of this person writing this. But they do offer some solutions. They say, Solution 1, non-playable tutorials using pre-recorded inputs to demonstrate mechanics and concepts with accompanying text. Patches would break these, and therefore the game would need to contain parameters for the patch that they were recorded on to prevent this. A potential solution 2, non-playable tutorials using pre-recorded video files. These would bloat the game's file size, however. I don't think this is the biggest problem if they're temporary, right? If you have, not the longest videos, you know? And then solution 3, add in-game links, Steam browser, I guess, to Izal's Art of Rivals video, which is the best video tutorial for beginners. These are slightly outdated. I also have a beginner tutorial, but I made it so long ago, it's on a really crunchy mic, and stuff like that. It is definitely not great. This poster actually recommends the Dragdown Wiki, which I think is really awesome. You guys should definitely check it out. It's a great resource. However, we do have a comment from Dan, which is pretty bulky. He says, "Hey everyone, tutorials are prioritized in the team, and we're working under the plan that both intermediate and advanced tutorials will release during 2025, while character tutorials will be coming a good bit later. Probably not until console release, to be honest, for reasons I'll explain further down. Before I explain why tutorials take a long time to make a live service game, the first thing I want to call out is that a lot of players assume that a long tutorial is a silver bullet to improving our onboarding experience. We've seen from Rivals 1 and other competitive multiplayer games that tutorials are a piece of the puzzle, but a much smaller piece than these online discourses would let on. Firstly, to even play through a tutorial like the Rivals 1 has, you have to be pretty committed. It's not targeting the same people who play Smash Bros. Casually, it's targeting people who are interested in learning a new fighting game, because of the way its concepts are delivered is technical and closer to training mode than a fun gameplay experience. The casually appealing tutorial, to us, is story mode, where the learning is delivered in a way that doesn't feel like school. But story mode is even further out, and requires even more work to get done. So while we're prioritizing tutorials, we don't expect them to make the game much friendlier to casual players. We saw a lot of feedback on Rivals 1 about how hard the new player experience is, and unforgiving even after having all the tutorials in-game. As for why tutorials take a long time, especially intermediate and advanced ones, these tutorials are explaining features that are currently changing every other patch. Floor hugging is part of the advanced defense tutorial, and its uses and counters have been adjusted multiple times since launch as we work towards where we want the mechanic to lie. If the tutorial was already out, it would even be more costly, as these mechanic changes, as Waltz on our team, who works the training mode, trials, tutorials, and replay mode, would basically be the only one to work on tutorials, and nothing else that they could do would stay updated and bug-free as patches come out. We have already introduced bugs with the beginner tutorials, as menu and gameplay changes that go and change things that are caught either late by our QA or live players and require a quick pivot from our team to get fixes into the next hotfix update. Tutorials are programmed in a way that a slight change to frame data or attack properties can introduce bugs later that would need to be fixed. And then, big changes require redesigning and rewriting sections if the lesson is no longer accurate. The game is still young, and we want to be able to make the system-wide changes that we can feel improve the game's tutorials needs get pushed back as core gameplay takes priority. We also have started to localize the game as we get ready for consoles, and tutorials are tangled up in that process, as one of the features with the most text and different areas as text can appear. While we're still on Steam only, we have some leniency on localized text coming in a later hotfix for most of our updates, so we don't need to delay features, but tutorials are a feature that we would want to have multiple languages available day one, especially since people have been waiting a long time for them now. This only adds to complexity and people required to launch such a feature. Finally, just being a live service game makes creating and maintaining tutorials harder. The game is in constant flux as I mentioned above. Character balance in particular is a headache for the character tutorials. We saw this on Rivals 1 and spent a lot of time bug fixing and rewriting tutorials as we made bigger balance changes to the cast. It increased the costs of doing the experimental changes that some of our player base would prefer to see, like Raster's current mechanical changes. That's why we're delaying development on character tutorials as long as we can until the characters are more locked into their archetypes where they lie. Any updates to special moves and mechanics will be a lot more expensive after character tutorials are playable in-game, and we still have some special moves that we're targeting to be improved or changed, like Forceburn Special Pummel. It should do something else while fully charged probably. All that being said, we do agree that it's been too long since beginner tutorials. Now if we had 2 or 3 waltzes, then both intermediate and advanced tutorials would be available by now. But then also one of those waltzes would just be on updating and fixing tutorials, as we make general mechanic changes pretty frequently. The truth is that we're a small team, and there are other features that Waltz works on and need love, and still have gotten fixes since the beginner tutorial went out, and need more updates as the intermediate and advanced tutorials go out. So as I mentioned, we already do have these intermediate tutorials, and I actually heard that they're adding a few more at the start of next month, I believe, in that intermediate section. So this is really cool to see. However, it does make a lot of sense that since things are changing, and people like Dan, I would hope, know what they're planning on changing down the line. So things like maybe Forceburns tutorial, let's say, is going to be getting a rework, or maybe I imagine that Loxodon is going to be getting some attention to his kit. Because I know a lot of people, like on the podcast last week that we had, kind of mentioned that Loxodon isn't necessarily a terrible character, right? But there's not a lot of incentive to approach as him, right? So how do you add something into his kit that adds that extra layer of interactivity? Things like that, right? So as we see those changes start to be added to the game, you might need to see those tutorials shifted, which makes sense. While we're on the topic of Forceburn, I found this cool post that was upvoted a lot. It's not interacted with by a dev, but I thought it was interesting. They say, I'm recreating my Nolt post from the last 2 Nolts. I just suggested that they give Forceburn F-Tilt a purpose when he has Combust, since it doesn't leave smoke down, and if he has Combust, it's a meh move regardless. Also, his special pummel after grab doesn't do anything while Combust is up, so this means while Forceburn has all of his smoke, these moves don't feel as useful. I would be interested to see a kind of stabby, pokey neutral move like Arcane F-Tilt, or maybe you can breathe fire on them for his grab special pummel, or even use Super Clone for some cool clone Oki. Maybe even a twirling smoke that covers him on both sides like Rano F-Tilt for scrapping. Not asking for anything OP, but it could be weaker versions than those. Almost anything is better than current F-Tilt. Do you guys have any fun ideas? So if y'all actually have fun ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Personally, I think that a new special pummel could be needed, right? But I also see a lot of really good Forceburn players use F-Tilt to knock people down and then get a tech chase off of that. So while F-Tilt itself is not super crazy, right, you definitely can get some crazy things out of it if you're able to cover your opponent's next option. So I'm not saying that F-Tilt needs to stay the way it is necessarily, but I don't think that it's in the most dire need of a change, but I definitely do agree that the special pummel could get some love like Dan mentioned. This other post without a dev response caught my eye. They say, please rework ranked into a streamlined, modern offering. There have been many posts about how a lot of players actually want a character-based ranked mode, and how Dan wants to keep the current version because it counterpigs. And usually, the argument evolves around one side rightfully claiming that character-based ranked would remove the frustration of going down in elo when you try a new character, and then going back up in elo when you hop back to your main, which will result in a lot of unfair matches along the way, and on the other side rightfully claims that counterpicks are a part of platform fighters, especially competitive play. And I think both arguments are good and carry a similar weight. But in reality, there's another very important reason why so many modern fighting games opt for a character-based ranked mode. It's to streamline the whole experience. In a character-based ranked mode, you can select character and skin before you even queue for a match, and after a match you can re-queue with the same exact settings. This reduces setup time for matches and waiting in between rounds by a very big amount. This is even more important in a game where smaller player bases like Rivals 2, because shorter times between rounds and shorter setup means more fluctuation in the ranked queue, and a much better chance to find a fair match. Streamlining the whole experience with character-based ranked would not only solve the alt character problem, it would also speed up match time and thus improve match quality. Additionally, I would like to see an option to rematch someone once if both agree, like most other games do. A third time if it's a tie. And I would also like to see going straight back to training in between matches, also something other games do. Finally, we need a lockout timer to get matches with someone again after you're done with the rematch or declined it. These changes would help improve the whole experience by a lot and are kind of expected by an audience since many other games have implemented these systems successfully. So really quickly, I agree with what they set up here in the top paragraph about the two different sides of the argument. This paragraph, I'm not so sure if I 100% agree. I don't think that I would enjoy being locked into just one character as I queue, but I do like the idea of having a different rank for each of my character. I really like how Rivals 1 did it, where let's say if I main Orcane and I have Orcane and Masters, I'll tell you a secret, I don't. But let's say if I did, we'll use our imagination today, and I pick Orcane, I could then counterpick to Crag, who I might have in, let's say, Gold, right? But if I picked my queue with Crag, I couldn't then swap to Orcane, who I have in Masters, if I've already locked into queue at the Gold level, if that makes sense. You can go down, but you can't counterpick up. I think that system works really well. I think this system really locks someone in on using their one character, which kind of loses the appeal of being able to counterpick in a platform fighter, which is a pretty common strategy used within the community. And I feel like it could be a little bit limiting, especially to more casual players who might have a wider character pool, but then less skill on each character, you know? However, I do agree that these changes would definitely improve the whole experience by a lot. I don't think they're necessarily expected by the audience, since I think that the rank system currently is fine. It's not like terrible, but it is definitely not what I would prefer. However, I think that these things are definitely being looked at by the team, and I imagine we'll be getting some changes probably sometime next year or maybe the year after. I wanted to wrap up the video on a more casual note and something that I enjoy talking about. This poster says, add more serious skins. Don't get me wrong, I love all the silly skins. I buy every pack since they're all so amazing. But it would be really nice if we could also get some more serious skins from time to time. With serious, I mean skins that are more canon, meaning just alternate outfits that the characters would still wear inside the lore. One example I would really like is an alternate Ollie skin that pays homage to Ken's new look in Street Fighter 6. So similar to her default skin, judo pants and all, but would be added with worn boots and a long coat. I think stuff like this would be really cool. Currently a lot of the spring skins have been a little bit more fantastical, especially the Valentine's Day event where we had Edalus in his little honey costume and Fleet with her Cupid wings. And then recently the summer skins weren't too serious either. They were pretty fun, but all the characters had casual wear, which I think is pretty fun. Personally, I would like to see more serious skins. Serious to me kind of rings like Demigod or Kane, right? Even Mecha, Loxodon, right? These skins that look cooler and more interesting, but they're not necessarily very funny. They're not very cutesy. I am glad that the skin has all kinds of skins as well. And I like cool skins as well, maybe the retro skins, right? The low poly. So I do think that it definitely does take all kinds, but I do think that we're due for a more edgy, maybe more interesting skin line soon, which I've actually heard that that's what we're getting next month. We're getting the mecha ones, which I mentioned earlier. And if you can, you should use code LASTDOG on them. With that being said though, thanks so much for watching until the end. I know I haven't done a Nolt video in a little bit. I've been kind of more focused on character guides and things like that, and I'm hoping to get a Zetterburn one out before I head over to Supernova next week. Fingers crossed that happens, I'm not really sure. With that being said though, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye for now.